Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, masks, vaccines, funding, and accountability in the public universities. But first, the big stories of the week.
Welcome to the fast-paced and unrehearsed weekly discussion featuring the leaders who help shape your world. Join us as we address the issues that impact you each and every day. This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
We have several big stories of the week in Pennsylvania. We're going to start with mask mandates in schools. Joining me to talk about that is Marc Levy. He's with the Associated Press, and Angela Couloumbis with the Philadelphia Inquirer and Spotlight PA. All right, I'll tell you, it seems like mask in schools is a story that never ends, and there's a lot of controversy over it in many of the school districts, correct?
Yeah, it created a lot of ugly school board meetings across the state, whether the school board ended up not doing a mandate, whether it ended up doing a mandate, and that was before the governor imposed one statewide. Now, Republicans in the legislature said that they would come back early to counter that earlier in September than they were planning, and they did, and then after 2 weeks of session, they never took a floor vote on a mask mandate bill. What they ended up doing instead was trying to force through legislation that shifted the debate to school choice, school privatization. So if you as the parent disagreed with whatever was going on in terms of mitigation, say like a mask mandate in your schools,
right,
you could get money to send your kid to a private school. And that failed in a floor vote on the House floor. 18 Republicans skipped out on it and voted against it, along with all the Democrats.
Well, there are I'm not being partisan about this, but there are big differences by party. It seems like Republican-controlled school boards, and a lot of Republicans say this decision needs to be made by the officials in the schools, in effect the school boards, not by state government. More Democrats say it's a state government decision, not the local school boards.
Well, actually, the governor, too, over the summer had kind of shifted a little bit on that point and had made the point that he thought, too, that it should be made at the school district level. But as cases began to go up and the Delta variant spread and more and more kids were becoming infected, he felt that it was necessary to shift and go back to a statewide mandate.
Right. Well, one of the other angles to this, and I think it's an important one, has to do with exemptions from it, whether it should be done by the parents, and some school districts are allowing the parents to say no mask, or you need a physician, to send a note along with a student or a parent to say exemption.
Right, and so that's become sort of a major loophole in it that the governor's office maybe never intended, but it has allowed some districts to get around it depending on sentiment in the area. Where
does this all go finally? In court?
Well, there is a lawsuit that Republicans have filed. Now, it's not a fast-tracked lawsuit, so it could take months. The Senate is out of session for several more weeks, so they'll be back on October 18th. So we wouldn't see any sort of final vote on anti-mask mandate legislation. But as we all know, the governor will veto it, even if it does pass both chambers. The other track is that some Republicans are talking about a constitutional amendment to strip this sort of mitigation power from the health secretary.
All right, let's change topics. I tell you, we don't often in this program talk about Securities and Exchange Commission, but we do talk about the public funding systems, which are huge in this state and cover a large number of people. So what's going on with the Securities and Exchange Commission?
So the latest is that the major pension fund that covers public school teachers and staff is under investigation by the SEC. Just this past week, we reported that a very lengthy and detailed subpoena from the SEC went to PSERS, the Public School Fund. And they are asking for reams and reams of records, but among their new focuses is looking into gifts and trips that PSER's staff may have taken and received from Wall Street advisors.
So what we're talking about is benefits that they may have gotten, I'll use that may have gotten while they were doing their job that they shouldn't have gotten.
Correct, because these they get paid fees to be advisors and consultants for the public school board.
Any idea where it goes?
These things take a long time, and it also follows on the heels of a separate FBI probe into PSERS for some of the same issues, but not the gifts piece. It will be months before these things are resolved.
Okay. We're going to run to a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the important governor's race 2022 in the state of Pennsylvania, and Marc Levy is going to weigh in on that.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association and Partners for Public Education, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Well, we're chatting about a number of important issues before the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Now let's turn to the governor's race. It's next year, 2022. We have an open Senate seat, an open governor's seat, and a situation that has not occurred in this state, I think, since the late 1960s when the Constitution was amended. And both of these elections, Senate, governor, are going to be followed nationally. Do I got that right? I mean, big time nationally.
Without a doubt. The Pennsylvania Senate race in 2016 broke the campaign finance spending record at the time. I mean, so it may do it again next year. In the Senate race, the fields are pretty much set from the outside looking in. In the governor's race, the Republican field just keeps growing and growing. It's hit double digits now, and there's more candidates who may yet get in. So one of the big questions right now that everyone wants to know is whether the Senate President, Jake Corman, is going to run. He is clearly considering it. A lot of people who've talked to him say that he's told them he's going to run. Other people say he hasn't made up his mind. I talked to him the other day, and he said, well, we'll talk about it after the election, meaning the municipal election,
this year.
Yeah, on November 2nd. So in some Republican circles, it's a faux pas to talk about yourself before this election.
Now, we were talking at the break about how expensive it is to run in the state of Pennsylvania. You need literally millions and millions and millions of dollars, 6 television markets, radio. Philadelphia, the 4th largest television market. You need organization. I mean, just to say you want to run is one thing. To actually get down into the trenches and raise the money is another thing, right?
Right, absolutely. And the Democratic field, it's widely expected that the Attorney General, Josh Shapiro, is going to announce at some point in the next few weeks or months for governor. And he has a very proven track record of being able to raise money and being very proficient at that. And he has a long record, public service record. So running against him is going to take a lot of money and field organization. And I think you're going to see this year's governor's race break records. Yeah,
you may, for the Attorney General, Josh Shapiro, the fact of the matter is that he, given his name recognition, elected Attorney General of the state, what can you say except he sort of cleared the field on the Democratic side, correct?
Yeah, that is very much the expectation. In fact, I've talked to people who are running for other offices because they didn't want to contest Josh Shapiro in the primary. He's quite likely will announce in the next couple of weeks. You know, one of really the only question is how much will his campaign have raised. The next filing deadline is the end of the year, so we won't really know all these candidates who say they're running for governor. We won't know how much money they have until January. And in Pennsylvania, there's no limits on
either one of you. But there's no doubt that he's going to be able to raise a sufficient amount of money. Am I correct about that, given his stature and given, you know, his past?
Absolutely, and you know, he's shown that even for his races for Attorney General. And anybody who looks at those campaign finance reports will see that he's a very formidable. He's got a reputation for being extraordinarily hardworking and like never sleeping and just being on 24/7.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, we'll have you back. I'll tell you, as I indicated before, big, huge national followers of this race. The reporters are going to be, your folks are going to be in the state. They're going to be all over the place.
Sure, the Senate race could, decide control of the U.S. Senate in 2023. Sure.
All right, thanks. All right, when we come up, we're going to talk about masks and vaccines, funding and accountability, and we'll take that up after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Cross-State Credit Union Association. Credit unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, go to ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, representing the faculty and coaches who are devoted to providing quality public higher education for Pennsylvania's college students.
Well, Jamie Martin joins me. She's the president of Abscuff. Abscuff represents, I'll get this right, the professors and the coaches. Do I got that right?
That's correct.
In the 14 publicly owned universities. Let's try it this way. We're talking about somewhere in the neighborhood of 90,000 students. And I won't say all of them, but a huge proportion of them live right here in the Commonwealth. Do I got that right?
You do have that right. Absolutely, Terry.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, look, we can't have a discussion about sort of any entity where there's a significant population without talking about masks and vaccine. As you know, Governor Wolf has this mask requirement in the public schools. That's created some controversy. What's the status of masks in the 14 publicly owned universities?
All of the 14 are requiring masks. Their students, faculty, staff, while they're on campus and inside buildings. Outside of the buildings, not so much. And in talking with colleagues at the 14, it seems as if the students are wearing their masks. They're not having issues with students not abiding by those. Faculty are wearing them.
Well, that's good.
The faculty are thrilled to be back in the classroom, and I think the students are as well. So I've been visiting some of the campuses, and I see everybody masked up, so that was good news.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I know there's a big controversy over, but particularly when you have college students, more younger people are getting COVID-19.
Yes.
You know, many of them are asymptomatic, and it's difficult to keep students apart. I mean, they're very social and interact with each other, and these protections, it seems to me, need to be in place.
Absolutely. I mean, it just makes good sense from a public health perspective to have students and faculty wearing masks.
All right, let's go to vaccines.
Okay.
We have masks and vaccines, the topics of the day. Go ahead.
Right. So we were absolutely in favor of a vaccine mandate, but given the political climate, I don't. That just wasn't going to be a possibility. The state system said they didn't have the authorization. It would require a change in state law.
Right.
So we know that most of the faculty are vaccinated. We don't know to what extent students are, and it seems in the eastern part of the state, more students are vaccinated than in the western part of the state. And so, as you mentioned, the students are required indoors to wear masks, but not so much out of. So we are seeing some COVID cases again on the campuses.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me that students would be. I'm not criticizing students. I'm just saying that they would be less likely to get vaccinated unless. Probably the universities would have to set up their own vaccination places in order to get it done. I would think that would be, if it gets to that.
And some of the universities have that.
Oh.
They do have vaccination clinics and testing clinics right on campus for students. And some of the campuses, they're doing surveillance testing for students who aren't vaccinated. Mm-hmm. So there are those options for students and for faculty and staff on the campuses.
How about testing? Is there a requirement?
Not at all 14, but at some of the campuses, they are requiring surveillance testing.
Right.
And I think that's led to some of the students deciding to get vaccinated.
Yeah. Yeah. Some places require if you don't get vaccinated, you have to do a weekly test. I mean, I don't think that's a situation in the 14 universities.
No, and not all of the 14 required students to report their vaccination status.
All right, I want to talk about money. As there's a great deal of money coming to the public universities as a result of federal government. And talk about that. It has to do with student retention. It has to do with there's a whole a series of things that are important here.
Oh, all of it's important, and as you and I have spoken before, these universities are the economic drivers. So with funding coming in, we're hopeful that we're going to see an increase in the funding for the state system. We've been always thrilled with the governor and the General Assembly for the support we get, but we really need additional funds to kind of get back to where we were prior to some of those drastic cuts earlier in the 2010, 11, 12 area. So yes, we do need more funding, and that goes directly to making college more affordable, helping students, be able to graduate without student debt, the significant amount.
Good point. Yeah, you've talked about it's important for student retention, it's important for graduation rates, it's important to make the system more affordable, particularly to low-income students.
Right, and we were supposed to, the system, that was our target, right?
Yeah.
To provide a high-quality, affordable income for Pennsylvania residents. Mm-hmm. We've gotten away from that affordability, and it's important for our students, when you speak with them and they're talking about, taking on a massive debt or not being able to take the same number of credits because of the cost.
All right, we're going to run to a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about affordability, things like student debt and more, and we'll do that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine.
Welcome back. We have to have a little truth in advertising. Many, many decades ago, I had Jamie Martin's job, and I was very, very active in Abscuff, not for decades now, but I want to point that out. That's important to do, right? All right, look, as we know, students go through 4 years in college, maybe some take longer, and they end up with a significant amount of student debt. Somewhere in, above $30,000, and they're just starting out in their careers. They, many of them don't even find a job immediately. That has to be a huge, huge problem.
It is. It's kind of a heartbreaking issue when you think about the amount of debt. Again, Pennsylvania is about 47th in the nation in terms of funding for higher education, and our students in Pennsylvania graduate with the second highest amount of debt in the nation. And so, right, they're starting out. In some cases, they may not be able to get a job in their discipline, so they're taking other kinds of jobs, starting a family, purchasing vehicles. Those kinds of things become difficult when you have that level of debt that you have to begin paying off.
Well, you have to have a life. I mean, and you start out with a big debt. That's really, and there's also some aspect of private loan borrowing, as well as in the federal government. So people will go out. Is there any place students can go? Do they get help in the universities about how to borrow money, where to borrow it from? That also creates a potentially important problem. You could borrow something at a huge interest rate, right?
I don't know to what extent there is that kind of information and education about taking out the amount of loans. We'd like to see some kind of ombudsman a program started so that, individuals would get information about that. But it's always a fear that they may not be getting enough information about the ramifications of taking that level of debt.
Yeah, there's an organization, I'm going to read it here, the Center for Responsible Lending, and I know your organization has been working. What do you do with that organization?
I don't know that we're doing that much with that organization, but we certainly would be. We're certainly working on student debt issues legislatively as well.
Yeah, so that means you have to meet with, does this partly, if not mostly, have to do with money that you get from, that universities get from the state government and from the federal government as well?
Sure. They're certainly getting some funding that way. Students, getting potentially grants or loans through FIA and some of those organizations. The universities do provide some scholarship money for students, on an emergency basis or merit-based, but there's just not enough funding for students. And again, if you lower tuition, lower fees, lower housing costs, that's where they really need that kind of help.
Well, you also, as we pointed out a few moments ago, getting money basically from the federal government. I guess it goes to the state government, then comes to you, if I understand that correctly. Down the road, any additional money that you expect will come? Well,
on July 1st, Governor Wolf actually announced a $200 million funding for the state system. It's historic funding, so we're looking forward to that. That came through the federal government through the ARA funds, and so we had the first $50 million investment this year, and we're looking forward to more in the next two. And that's certainly going to help student success, retention issues, diversity, equity, and inclusive kinds of programs. So we're excited about that kind of investment.
Yeah, I want to go back to something that you mentioned earlier, and you and I have talked about this before, but I think it's important. And that's you got 14 publicly owned universities. A large proportion of them are in rural and small town Pennsylvania, and they're very significant employers, not just directly, but they purchase things from stores and shops in the community, and that's a very, very significant aspect of the local economy.
Absolutely. And if you think of some of the areas, Mansfield, Clarion, California, if you drive through those areas, if the university wasn't there, there wouldn't be, the businesses would suffer dramatically. And so, they're, as we keep saying, the economic drivers, but they're important for the students in those local areas to have access to those higher education institutions.
Yeah, and for many, it's the only place that they'll be able to go to a university to get a higher education.
Yes. I taught at IUP, and we drew most of our
Indiana University of Pennsylvania. We all call it IUP. That's okay.
But we drew most of our students from just the probably 3-4 counties surrounding that university. Not all of them, but that's where the draw was from, and that's true for most of our universities, that most of the students are from a nearby area. So without those universities being there, there probably isn't an option for many.
Well, look, I want to thank you for coming in. You'll keep us updated. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.